Good morning, secondary methods. This video is designed to help you complete the TEKS Scavenger Hunt that you have as an assignment in the Week 1 folder. In this video, I'm going to recap what the TEKS are, how they are created, what vertical and horizontal alignment is, and then I will show you how to complete that scavenger hunt that's due this week. As an educator, it's important to understand where your standards come from because in the United States, that differs from state to state. A lot of states have adopted the Common Core state standards. Texas obviously is not one of those states. We use our own state standards, which are called the TEKS, and that stands for Texas Essential Knowledge and Skills. Now, the State Board of Education, or SBOE, they are the ones who are tasked with conducting the process of reviewing, revising, and streamlining the TEKS. This is a very lengthy process that often takes 2 to 3 years from the time they start having people apply to be committee members to selecting those committee members to reviewing and commenting and doing public comments to publishing the final draft. So this is why you may notice that it takes about a decade for the new TEKS to be implemented. So for example, the English Language Arts TEKS, they were last published in 2009. We have a set of TEKS for 2017 that are to be implemented this year in elementary, and then next school year 2020-2021 in grades 7 through 12. The content areas do not all get updated during the same year. The science TEKS are currently under review and they're open for public comment. The social studies TEKS are beginning their streamlining review, but they're not anywhere near public comment yet. So if you look at them, if you look at the different content areas, you'll notice that they go in cycles. They don't all get renewed at the same time. The specials TEKS like art, music, theater, and PE do not get updated near as often as the core subjects, mainly because they're not tested and there's not a lot of federal mandates that the states have to follow and get updated. The reason the TEKS review process takes so long is because there are so many steps in the process. First, the SBOE gathers all of the stakeholders who want to apply. They have stakeholders apply online and then they select stakeholders to be on different committees. So there's parents, there's educators, there's industry and business representatives, as well as employers who are selected by the State Board of Education to serve on these writing committees. The groups then go through multiple writing and revision sessions before a draft of the TEKS is released to the public for comment. The public then has the opportunity to comment on that draft of the TEKS. That's usually done online, and it's about 30 days that they have that time to comment. The comments then go back to the committees and the SBOE, and they make additional revisions and then submit a final draft to the SBOE, who has a meeting decides whether or not they will adopt that final draft. Once it is adopted by the SBOE, the new TEKS become law. But the year the TEKS become law isn't necessarily the same as the year they're going to get implemented. You're going to see a 1 to 2 year lag time. So for instance, with those English Language Arts TEKS, they were passed into law in 2017. We just started implementing them this year, and then they're expected to be fully implemented by next school year. Once those TEKS are signed into law, SBOE then puts out a call for curricular materials. So that goes to textbook companies, to educators, that kind of thing, and they'll submit those materials for adoption by the state. Those are what your state-aligned materials are. As an educator, you're not required to use state-aligned materials. Those are just suggested by the state. One more thing I want you to know about before we start the scavenger hunt is horizontal and vertical alignment. The TEKS are supposed to be vertically and horizontally aligned in every single content area, but because you have committee members coming from a wide variety of backgrounds and it's such an extensive process, sometimes that gets a little bit out of whack. But what horizontal alignment is, it means that the same material is being taught across the grade level in any given classroom. So 7th grade here in Canyon is going to be the same as 7th grade in Amarillo, the same in San Antonio, Dimmitt, that kind of thing. And the material is aligned with state and or district standards. So we're prepping those students. They're learning the material that they're going to be assessed on throughout the school year or at the end of the school year. Vertical alignment is when a curriculum is scaffolded so that the information a student learns in lower grades prepares them for more advanced grades and challenging work. So, for instance, we may have in kindergarten, we're learning letter formation and we're learning how letters sound and how to put those sounds together to form a word. And then by 3rd grade, students are expected to be able to write sentences with no adult assistance. So as you do your scavenger hunt, pay really close attention to the verbs that are used in those knowledge and skills statements, because those verbs are going to increase in skill level as you move throughout the grade levels. Also watch for things like with adult assistance. Those will often appear in the elementary grades, in the early elementary grades, and then they disappear as the students move up through the grades. Okay, so as you do your scavenger hunt, you're going to want to know the 3 parts of the TEKS. One of those is the introduction. That's the huge statement at the beginning. Then there are the strands, and the strands stay the same from K through 12. And then there are the knowledge and skills statements. So let's take a look at a couple of examples from across content areas and identify those 3 components before we dig into the scavenger hunt. Okay, so I have pulled up the middle school art TEKS to take a look at. And all of the TEKS are formatted the same way. They're in this very non-user-friendly format available online, and then you can also print them off or look at them in the app. So every single set of TEKS, no matter the content area, is going to start with the legal jargon. It's going to tell you the provisions and the subchapter, that's the name of the law. They talk about when they were adopted. So these art TEKS were adopted in 2014, it looks like, and then they were expected to be implemented beginning in 2015. And if I scroll down a little ways, I'll see that there's an introduction. The introduction provides a very broad overview of what's going to happen in art in that grade level, in those standards. And then you'll see the knowledge and skills statements. These are probably what you are most familiar with at this point in class, and you know that they start with a number and then they have letters that follow them. What I want you to pay attention to in your set of TEKS are the names of the strands. So if I'm looking at art, I see that they have strands named foundations, they have a strand named creative expression, they have a strand named historical and cultural relevance, and they have a strand named critical evaluation and response. Art only has 4 strands. If I move through the grade level, if I move to middle school 2, which is maybe 6th grade, maybe 7th grade, I'll see that those strands are the same. It's still foundations, creative expression, historical and cultural relevance, critical evaluation, and response. Those stay the same K through 12. If we look at the math TEKS, the high school math TEKS, we notice they're formatted the same way. All that legal jargon, date of adoption, date of implementation in the first part, introduction for the course in the second part, and then we have our knowledge and skills statements. And so the high school math strands are things like mathematical process standards, linear functions, equations, and inequalities. The strand is still the same from 2 to 3 to 4 to 5. Then we get a new strand in 6. It's quadratic functions and equations. That stays the same, 7, 8, 9 jumps to exponential fractions and equations, and so on. You'll notice that math is a core content area, and so there are a lot more knowledge and skills statements listed in the TEKS than there were in art, because there's not as much federal and state mandates about what has to go into that. Okay, so now that we have that common background information, we're ready to start our TEKS Scavenger Hunt. I want you to print a copy of your TEKS for your certification area that you can take notes on, you can highlight, etc. We're going to use that the entire semester to do this scavenger hunt, write content objectives, write language objectives, to write our lesson plans, and finally to make our informal and formal assessments that go along with these standards. There's also a TEKS app that you can download if you don't have that on your phone already. This is going to make searching for specific knowledge and skills statements easier, but because some of those get a little wordy, reading it on your phone can get a little intense. So I highly recommend having a printed copy as well as your electronic copy. If you are on a computer, you can use the Control F function to find keywords in the TEKS. So go ahead and print those off and get those ready. You are also going to need a copy of the scavenger hunt form, which you can find in the Week 1 folder in Blackboard. So once I've got my TEKS downloaded and ready to go, I'm going to go ahead inside the Week 1 folder and click on Secondary TEKS Scavenger Hunt, and I'm going to open up that Word document so that I can type directly in there as I complete my assignment. And you'll see that it says the TEKS are organized by strands, which we just talked about. Each content area has a different number of strands. Most of them go from K through 12. I think science gets a little tricky and math gets a little tricky on us, but you can find the name of the strands at the beginning of the knowledge and skills statement. So that's your first task, is to identify the names of the strands in your content area. We also talked about how to find when the last time your content area TEKS were updated. That's the second question. And the same area is going to contain the information of when those TEKS are supposed to begin implemented. So because most of you are K through 12, or you're 9 through 12 or 7 through 12, I want you to understand vertical alignment. So I'm going to have you look at a TEK from 7th grade, write that down. I want you to go find that TEK in a higher grade level. The wording is going to be similar, and I want you to see how the verbs or the examples change. I want you to see how that skill changes over time. I want you also to identify 5 verbs that are used throughout your TEKS. That's going to help us write content objectives next week. And I want you to rank those verbs according to difficulty. So this is going to go back to your previous courses like EPSI 3341, where you talked about things like Bloom's taxonomy or depth of knowledge. And I just want you to kind of use that knowledge that you have and figure out which verbs you think are harder than the other ones. On number 8, you're going to peruse through your TEKS. You're going to use a highlighter to mark any words, events, or concepts that you are unfamiliar with. And the reason that I'm having you do this is because this is the best way to figure out what you don't know that you need to know for your content exams. Your TEKS are a great source to study for your content exams. So if there's vocabulary, or there's processes, or you're doing history and there's events, or there's math and there's different kinds of equations you have to solve, you need to know any vocabulary, any term, any event, any person that is listed in your TEKS, because all of that is game for your content exam. So that's what I want you to do for number 8, and kind of give me some notes about some of those things that you don't know. For number 9, I want you to look throughout the TEKS, throughout the grade level, and make some general observations about how the TEKS evolve from grade level to grade level. And you don't have to give me like 7th, 8th, 9th, because maybe 7th, 8th, and 9th are really similar, but then in 10th you see a jump. So say from 7th to 10th grade, I see this. I want you to type all of that up in that Word document, save that Word document, and then go into Blackboard and submit it to the TEKS Scavenger Hunt Dropbox in the Week 1 folder. And that will complete your assignments for this week. That and the syllabus quiz are your 2 assignments for Week 1. I will see you in week 2's video.